Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Veteran members of both parties in Washington suddenly seem pretty excited about forcing the president from office without bothering to call an election. Well, call that what you will. It's not democracy. Not that they care. They just want their power back. But before that happens, we have some questions for the permanent class in Washington about what exactly it is they believe and what they plan to do if they retake power. That's just ahead. But first, in case you were starting to sour on Donald Trump after all the drama of the last week, Barack Obama reappeared today to remind us why America elected Trump in the first place. In a remarkable departure from tradition and decorum, Obama gave a bitterly partisan campaign speech at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, in which he urged voters to support Democrats in the midterm elections. Like virtually all Obama speeches, the subtext was mostly about the omnipresence of white racism, which Obama, needless to say, blamed for the rise of Trump. But then he got creative. Watch, for example, as Obama blames the current administration for pursuing almost exactly the same Russia policy that he once did.
What happened to the Republican Party? Its central organizing principle in foreign policy was the fight against communism, and now they're cozying up to the former head of the KGB.
How did a guy from Hawaii learn to talk like that? Where did he get that accent? It's pretty funny. But that was just an aside. Soon, Obama went back to his favorite and endlessly recurring theme, Republican racism. Here's one quote. Each time we painstakingly pull ourselves closer to our founding ideals, that all of us are created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, somebody, somewhere, has pushed back. In other words, Republicans just hate equal rights. That's why they elected Trump. They're just like slaveholders in the antebellum South. Watch Obama explain.
Now understand, this is not just a matter of Democrats versus Republicans or liberals versus conservatives. At various times in our history, this kind of politics has infected both parties. Southern Democrats were the bigger defenders of slavery.
Slavery. Say it simple. Racism did it. Interestingly, the one thing Obama didn't mention was the death of the American middle class. And that's odd because it was only in 2015, 7 years into Obama's presidency, when the middle class became a minority in this country for the first time in living memory. That was the pivotal event of the past several decades. It changed this country profoundly. It is the cause of nearly all of our current political turmoil. But to Obama, it simply never happened. And of course, 7 years of his policies had literally nothing to do with it. Throughout Washington, establishment figures burst into applause when they heard that. They don't want to talk about the dying middle class either. They're not interested, and they don't want to be implicated. So much easier just to blame racists under the bed. Chris Hahn is a radio show host in New York and a former staffer to Senator Chuck Schumer, and he joins us tonight. So, Chris, is it really that simple? I mean, the president said today, if you read the speech carefully, as I did, what most Democrats have been saying for the last 2 years, it's just racism. All of this is racism. People couldn't, Republicans, rural people, they just couldn't deal with all the equality, and so there was a backlash, and they elected Trump. Is that really the explanation, do you think?
Yeah, I don't think that's really what he said today, and I think it's rich for anybody. I think it's rich for anybody to say that norms were not being followed today, which is what you opened with today, because norms have not been followed for the last 20 months by this president. And I think it's time that every good American start pushing back. And I think President Obama's speech today was a rallying cry to the entire country.
Okay. It was a campaign speech designed to get Democrats elected. He's a Democrat. I'm not begrudging him that. But I guess I would just make 2 points. One, if you're against overturning norms, then surely it must bother you that a recently retired president is giving a campaign speech. We have a norm that they don't do that. He just did. And since you're a defender of norms, you're not bothered?
No, I just don't think that the people who love freedom and love our Constitution in this country should universally disarm to a president who has decided to push every norm, including calling on the press, including, hold on, Tucker, including calling on the press to turn someone over to the government, which, you know, the Republican Party used to think that Obamacare was tyranny. Don't you think that's more tyrannical?
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. You're talking. Okay. Whatever. It's also such a talking point. So look, that's fine. Then just don't ever lecture me about norms again. If it's bad for Trump to overturn norms, which he's certainly done, I'm not denying that. Obviously, he has.
Completely.
He has. And Obama just did it again today. But that's cool, and what Trump is doing is bad, because why? Stop lecturing me about norms, please. But let's get back to the race thing.
Look.
Because I think it's real. Obama, I read the speech. I watched the speech. Again and again he says, this is part of a long cycle in American history. He says it out loud, where we enfranchise certain groups in the country, and certain reactionary elements hate that, and so they strike back. That's how Trump called it. He just said that. He blamed this on racism. And I'm asking you, do you think that's true? Is that really what the Trump election was about? Racism?
I watched the speech and then I read it again in preparing for this show. And President Obama said that there are genuinely people in this country that fear change, and it's not because of race. That's what he said today. Okay? Are there people in this country? Are there people in this country that have a racial element to their politics? Of course there are, Tucker. We both agree on that. Yeah,
Obama is first on that list, I would say. But let me ask you, honestly, don't you think if you're assessing what's going on in America, and Obama fancies himself as intellectual, as you know, and you guys pretend he is an intellectual, shouldn't you mention the death of the middle class in your speech? During his presidency, the middle class, for the first time in anyone's lifetime, became a minority in this country. That caused a ton of anxiety that, in my view, resulted in Trump's election. He doesn't even mention that. No one ever mentions that. Why?
Yeah.
I'm serious.
So the president took over. President Obama took over an economy that was bleeding jobs, and he resuscitated it, including many industries that would have just gone away had it not been for the policies of the Obama administration. And you're right, the middle class did take a hit during the Obama administration, as it had done in the Bush administration as well.
Yes, I agree. Look, I'm not
because
I'm not a mindless partisan. I'm not defending George W. Bush.
It's not roaring back either, by the way. Let's be clear.
I don't think it is. And I'm not here to tout Republicans, who I attack regularly on the show. I just want someone to stop lying and concede that all of this is not about racism. It's about the death of our middle class, which sustained the country for 100 years. Can you admit that?
I think that the pressure on the middle class is something that has absolutely contributed to our politics, Tucker. And it has also caused people who are under stress to take it out in ways that are not necessarily good.
Yeah, that's probably true, but we should fix the problem.
So,
racism.
Yeah, I agree. We should fix the problem.
But it's always the racism. All right.
We should fix the problem, and I don't think that this president is capable of doing it.
Yeah, maybe screaming racist will fix the problem. Maybe it will. Chris, thank you.
Somebody, a very popular guy here, was just interviewing me. You know who I'm talking about, great guy. And he said, what do you think of President Obama's speech? And I said, I'm sorry, I watched it, but I fell asleep. I found he's very good for sleeping. I think he was trying to take some credit. He was trying to take credit for this incredible thing that's happening to our country. If the Democrats got in, I have to say this to President Obama, and it wasn't him, but would have been the same thing. If the Democrats got in with their agenda in November of almost 2 years ago, instead of having 4.2 up, I believe, honestly, you'd have 4.2 down. You'd be negative. You'd be in negative numbers right now. You'd be in negative numbers. We were heading south. And you look at those bad numbers that were there in the last couple of years, it was this way and going in the wrong direction. It was the weakest recovery in the history of our country since, I guess, to be totally specific, because I'm not sure they've gone any further, since the Great Depression in the 20s. It was the weakest recovery we've ever had. It's barely a recovery. And now this is called not recovery. This is called rocket ship, what's happening.
Right now, as Senate lawmakers grill the AG nominee William Barr, we're learning more about the deep state and the abuses he'll be confronting when confirmed. For example, according to reporting from our own Catherine Herridge, former top FBI lawyer James Baker, this is under Comey, is the subject now of a criminal investigation into illegal leaks to the media. And there's also growing evidence of the deep anti-Trump bias among senior FBI officials. Now, with Devin Nunes from the House Intel Committee revealing that the Bureau's leaders, quote, had no real evidence against the Trump team, but launched an investigation anyway following the Comey firing. Joining us now with reaction is the congressman himself, Congressman Devin Nunes. Congressman, when I hear that, what I'm hearing is that is a revenge investigation, but it had already gone on for 9 months. Immediately after they exonerated Hillary with no investigation, they launched the so-called Trump-Russia collusion investigation. 9 months into it, Comey's fired, but we learned from Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, McCabe himself, and Comey that they had nothing at that point. Why would they then sit in a room and basically say, well, maybe the president conspired with Putin to fire James Comey?
So, Sean, let's think about it a different way. So we have these supposed Russia hawks sitting over at the counterintelligence division at the FBI and DOJ. Where were they in 2012 when Barack Obama got caught on a hot mic telling the Russian leader at the time he needed more time and to wait till after the election? It looks like that was trying to work with the Russians. Where were they investigating when the Ukrainians were begging the United States for weapons? The Congress was trying to give weapons to the Ukrainians after the Russians had invaded and annexed Crimea. Nobody went to investigate the Obama White House or President Obama. So you have no evidence in this case. You have no records, no phone calls, absolutely nothing of any sort. And yet you supposedly or reportedly are investigating the president. And furthermore, supposedly this scope memo that outlines whatever Mueller's supposed to be looking at, if the New York Times story is to be believed from last Friday night, a Friday night news dump, if that's to be believed, then that means that somebody leaked pieces of that scope memo to the New York Times. And we still have yet to see it here in the Congress.
Well, John Huber's supposed to be investigating that. He's been working a long time. We could use an update. I don't know if you've seen this piece in the Epic Times. The headline is McCabe's FBI tried to re-engage Christopher Steele after Comey was fired, and they have a transcript supposedly by Bruce Orr showing the FBI went back to Steele between Comey's firing and Mueller's appointment. Now, we also know that there was communication. Bruce Orr was the conduit, if you will, for Christopher Steele. And he was trying to get his information. Remember, he's been discredited. The dossier has been discredited. He was fired for lying and leaking from the FBI, but yet he's still in contact with all these top officials and trying to feed information to Mueller, which we got in the exchanges with Bruce Orr.
So remember how we got here. So we set up a task force. We gave a list to, at the end of the last Congress, or actually last summer, a task force was created to conduct a bunch of interviews. What supposedly now is leaking out are pieces of these interviews that Chairman Gowdy and Chairman Goodlatte had asked for the FBI and DOJ to release them. They sat on them. Now I think what's happening is people are selectively leaking pieces of this. So I read the story in the Epic Times. I have not read all the transcripts, so I don't know if that is true or not, but obviously it's very alarming if it's true that in that time period that they were already trying to go back to Steele and get him to come back after they knew he was terminated for lying and misleading the FBI. Very, very concerning, and I think we need to know more about this, which is why these transcripts from all these interviews need to be released.
Well, we got to hope that the new Attorney General gets into this deeply.
I agree with you.
All right. Congressman Nunes, thank you very much. All right.